I like to spend my free time doing what normal adult human beings like to do. Reading data sheets. While I was going through the Ilford HP5 datasheet, I saw this interesting chart. This is a temperature compensation chart. When I saw this chart, I realized I never really tried developing film outside the vanilla 20 degrees Celsius. And so my first thought was to devise a plan that systematically increased the temperature while compensating for the development time. But then I remembered I'm really lazy, so I just poured boiling water into a tank just to see what would happen. And this is what I got. Holy crap, it actually worked. When I pulled the film out of the tank and saw that I had pictures, I just stood there staring at this like a big idiot. I wasn't sure what to make of it, so I quickly shot another roll and tried it again. Yeah, it still works. If you look closely at the scans, there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot to unpack. So the first thing I want to talk about is the development process. I use Rodinal 1 to 25 at 100 degrees Celsius for about 5 seconds. And I used the hottest water out of the tap for my stop bath and fixer. The next thing I need to bring up is the development tank. I learned how to develop film with plastic reels and tanks. I've developed hundreds of rolls with these reels and I feel extremely comfortable with these, but they're made of plastic and I'm afraid that they could warp or maybe even melt. And I didn't really feel like risking my tanks and reels, but fortunately there's another option. Steel tanks and reels. Trying to learn how to use the steel reel was one of the most aggravating experiences of my life, mostly stemming from this awful clip. This is supposed to hold the film on the reel, but instead all it did was make me reevaluate everything I did in my life, which led me up to this point. I somehow managed to get 2 rolls reeled up in spite of this horrible thing. If I was going to develop any more rolls, I needed a better solution, which led me to this Hughes reel. By all accounts, this is the best metal reel out there, and I hope so because it was not cheap. One of the things about this metal tank is that you have to pour in the chemistry at an angle to allow the air to escape, otherwise the chemistry will just slowly dribble in. And I remembered this a few seconds into pouring chemistry and wondering why this is taking so long. Which could explain this exposure gradient you're seeing, but with the second roll I managed to pour in the developer just fine, but I still had this gradient. But moving on, the next thing I want to point out is the reticulation. From afar you might miss it, but taking a closer look you can see that this entire roll is reticulated. It's not surprising given that the film went from room temperature to boiling and back. So for this next roll I wanted to see if I can manage the temperature a bit better in order to avoid reticulation. I started with a pre-bath and incrementally raised the temperature, and when it got hot I poured in boiling water. And at this point I need to tell you that I forgot what dilution I used before and I ended up underdeveloping the roll, but if you just ignore that, you can see that the roll is still reticulated. So whatever I did, it didn't work. So for the next roll I decided to smooth out the temperature changes. But as I was pouring out the developer, I accidentally dropped the tank and the lid popped off. I quickly dumped the fixer into the tank and finished up the process, but you know, it's too late. Even though I absolutely butchered this roll, if you look closely you could still see that there's reticulation. It was interesting to see how sensitive the film was to light post-development pre-fix. So I tried it again, but instead of just incrementally increasing the temperature, I decided during the pre-wash to place the tank on a steamer rack inside of a pot and then bring that slowly to a boil. Then I poured in the boiling water, then brought it down back to near room temperature, and something went horribly wrong. Please ignore the fact that somehow I've been getting worse results with each attempt. Just look at the reticulation. It's the most aggressive and pronounced out of the bunch. At this point, I give up. I don't care about the reticulation anymore. The reticulation won. Instead, I now wanted to see how quickly I could develop film. So I developed this roll. From the moment I poured in the developer to the moment I poured out the fixer, it was all done in under 2 minutes. The results actually came out okay. The negatives came out a little thin. They probably could have used another second or two in development. There's still a fog that covers the frames, but it's much more controlled and even. But in the end, you get a picture. And at this point, I don't know if there's anything more you could ask from this. This is as far as I got. But I do wonder, how hot can you actually develop film? I mean, the emulsion or the base has to melt off at a certain point. If any of you know any of the answers to any of these questions, please let me know. Or if anyone knows how I could get better results, I'm all ears and I'm down to try this again.